Hey everyone, and welcome to the April 2016 edition of Budget MTG. I'm Nitzahone, and this is a monthly series here on my channel where I post a deck that costs around 50 tickets on Magic Online, usually under about $100 in paper. And these decks are intended to be competitive. They're the kind of competitive that you could take them to Friday Night Magic and have a good time and do pretty well. Not competitive like, hey, you should take this to a pro tour necessarily. I mean, obviously, the decks there are on a different level to a certain degree. But these decks are competitive, and I do play the same deck that I'm showing you right now in 5 matches in a standard league, because this week is standard. Before I get into talking about the deck itself, though, I do want to tell you guys that I recently started a Patreon campaign. If you like the content that I create and you want to help me make it even better, you can support me on Patreon. So this month is a Blue-White Skies deck. If you're someone who's watched Budget MTG for a while, I've actually posted 2 other Skies decks in the last, 6 to 8 months or so. One of them is in Modern, an Esper Skies deck. Makes use of Lingering Souls and tokens and stuff like that. And the other one was an old Standard, the Standard from Theros block to Magic Origins. Basically what a Blue-White Skies deck is, and it's an archetype I like clearly because I like playing a lot of evasive creatures, and the format has to be pretty wide, has to have a low number of flyers being played, and be open to an aggressive deck being a good deck. And those things I think are both true right now. I'll talk more about that in a second. But basically, Blue-White Skies deck is all about playing a bunch of low, efficiently costed flyers who also can be pumped by Anthem effects that are within the deck. And that's what we have here. And on top of that, this deck also has a large number of creatures with flash. It has 14 creatures with flash in it. And that allows the deck to also play a little bit of a control game, which is important right now because, not so much control, but it's important to be able to counter board sweepers because there's a lot of them in Standard right now, and this deck can counter those. So I'll get into talking about the deck. We'll look at the creatures first. I have Topplegeist as my only 1-drop, a 1-mana 1/1 flyer. Fairy Miscreant was in this deck at one point, but I ended up going with Topplegeist because of synergies it has with other cards. It doesn't have a super high chance of getting Delirium. We have to have one of our instants go in our graveyard. We only have 5 of those. And one of our enchantments, we only have 4 of those. And one of our Evolving Wilds or another land if it gets milled or something. And we don't have that many Evolving Wilds either. So it's not going to have Delirium very often. Most of the time it's just going to be a 1-mana 1/1 flyer, but it's, gets Anthem effects, so it gets to be a problem for the opponent. I have won games where I weirdly drew like 2 or 3 Topplegeists and just Anthem effects and destroyed my opponent, so it does happen. Dimensional Infiltrators, one of our flash creatures. We don't ever use the colorless ability because I didn't want to dilute my mana at all, and there's not a Adarkar Waste isn't in Standard, so there's no Pain Land to help me have a chance of playing it, otherwise I would have. But it's a 2-mana 2/1 with flash, and having flash is important in this deck because it lets us play stuff like Negate. And we can mainboard Negates because our deck can leave mana up all the time because there's so many creatures with flash. And if we leave mana up for Negate, we can counter all board sweeping removal. I don't recommend casting Negate that often on one-on-one removal spells, unless you're going to win the game if you counter the removal spell they're using. But Planeswalkers, which are in Standard right now, and that are very good in Standard right now, and board sweepers can both be countered with that. Here's another one of our flash creatures, Rattle Chains, 2-mana 2/1 with flash and flying, and it can give another Spirit Hexproof. This is a synergy I talked about with Topplegeist. I can protect it. I mean, it's not going to be targeted by removal that often, but it is sometimes. But it also gives my Spirit spells flash. So Topplegeist with flash is pretty nice because if I'm racing my opponent, which is usually what this deck does against other aggro decks, I can flash it in and tap down their best attacker and really get ahead in the race. And that's pretty sweet. Stratus Dancer we have in the deck, another creature that lets us be an aggressive deck, but lets us leave mana up effectively to counter, once again, board sweepers. The downside about Stratus Dancer is it can't counter Planeswalkers, one of the problematic card types that Stratus Dancer can't counter. But it's also a 2-mana 2/1 with flying when I need it to be, and we have a lot of those. We run 1 main board Bygone Bishop. There's more in the sideboard, as I'll show you in a second. He's good in grindier matchups where a control deck's really just trying to grind us out because he gets us value for every spell we play, basically. And we can draw cards later in the game to make up for the board sweepers that get cast. He's also a Spirit, so he also will have flash sometimes, and I can give him Hexproof sometimes. Then Always Watching is one of the key cards in this deck. Giving non-token creatures I control +1/+1 in Vigilance is a big deal. It lets us basically win any race if we get Always Watching and have 2 or 3 flyers in play. We also have 2 Silumgar Sorcerers, another creature with flash. I think I actually didn't cast them when I was looking at flash, but count them. But this one's another one who acts also as a counterspell in addition to just being a 2/1 flyer, which is fine. And it can counter problem creatures if I needed to. Only 2 main board, another in the sideboard. Then we do have one creature who doesn't have flying, but it's in our colors, and it's one of the best creatures in Standard right now. So we play Reflector Mage. It does have some, pseudo synergy with the deck. We can bounce their only flyer and just swing for lethal. That does happen with Reflector Mage. Or we can just bounce their best creature, or, you can do a lot of stuff with Reflector Mage. We have 2 Ojutai's commands because we can leave mana up so effectively and still do stuff. And it's really flexible. It can get us back a lot of the creatures in our deck from our graveyard. It can counter a creature spell, can gain us 4 life, and it can draw us a card. All things we want to be doing in certain situations. It's not at its best against other aggro decks, but it's okay against them. And 4 Thunderclap Wyverns, that's our other Anthem effect, and our other creature with Flash. At instant speed, we can make a Fiery Impulse not kill something. Things like that are pretty cool. And it has a decent body for its cost as well. And having the ability to flash, too, like, opponents aren't expecting it. Like, I've had lots of people swing in with, like, creatures that would have been lethal. I flash in a Dimensional Infiltrator to block one of their creatures, and then we swing for lethal on our turn. So they just don't expect it. And that's one thing that this deck has going for it. Talk about the sideboard some now. We have 2 Felidar Cubs for dealing with enchantments. There's Silk Wraps and Stasis Snares all over the place in Standard. And the decks that play them are usually the more aggressive ones, so we can side out, like, our negates against them and put in, something like Felidar Cub. We have Hallowed Moonlight. It's good against Secure the Waste. It's a popular card in Standard right now. Also good against Collected Company, a popular card in Standard right now. Silk Wrap. We side our own Silk Wraps in against other aggro decks for our 3 negates, usually, because negates are just not going to be that good against them. We have 1 Encase in Ice, another spell with Flash that we can also use to act as removal on a lot of big, scary creatures. Horribly Arise, something we can side in against aggro decks in place of negate if we want to. And we have a 4th negate for against other decks that play a lot of board sweepers. Then we have 2 more Bygone Bishops for against grindier decks. Then we also have Vryn Wingmare, which is great against control decks. It's also not bad against Collected Company because making it cost 5 is pretty significant. And we have a third Silumgar Sorcerer to side in against creature-heavy decks where the ability to counter a creature is better than, the ability Bygone Bishop has. So this is the deck. I'll show you how much it costs. I am recording this about a week ahead of, actually about 5 days ahead of when you're going to actually see this on my channel because I have to record the 5 games as well. But the deck, sideboard, and all right now costs $34.98. In the description of this video, you can see there's the deck list on Tapped Out. You can click on that. It'll tell you how much it costs. And if you're watching this like right after I posted it, in the name of the video, I'll have how much it costs in tickets on Magic Online and how much in dollars. But that will only probably hold water for a little while, and I'm not going to be updating it regularly. So the best thing to do is probably just to go to Tapped Out and see the deck list there because it'll tell you about how much it costs. So that's the deck. I'll play 5 matches with it in the friendly sealed league. I think that's a little more comparable to a Friday Night Magic environment than the competitive sealed league is, so that's where we're going to go with this. It's a new league. I just figured I'd try it out this month. Maybe I don't like it and I'll end up doing competitive again next month, but we'll see. So that's the deck. Let me know what you think of it. Let me know if you think there's anything that I missed that should go in the deck. If you have any comments at all about the deck, let me know. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.